world outside Alara's cottage was always a symphony of soft sounds. The rustle of leaves in the ancient oaks, the distant murmur of the willow creek, and the gentle hum of bees flitting between petals. But within her small, sun-drenched glasshouse, where her most precious plants resided, there was a different kind of quiet. It was the hush of growing things, a silent, vital energy that Alara felt deep in her bones, a language only she seemed to understand. Her nursery, lovingly named the Whispering Roots, was less a business and more a sanctuary. Nestled on the very edge of Oakhaven Village, where the manicured gardens gave way to the wild embrace of the Whispering Woods, it was a place of verdant magic. Most people in Oakhaven knew Alara as the quiet woman who could coax the most stubborn seed to sprout and heal the most wilting bloom. They came to her for rare herbs, for remedies whispered down through generations, and sometimes just for the serene calm that seemed to emanate from her small, unassuming plot of earth. Alara herself was like one of her delicate plants, outwardly modest, but possessing an inner strength and beauty that blossomed under observation. Her hair, the color of rich soil, was usually braided loosely, escaping in soft tendrils around a face often dusted with potting mix. Her eyes, the shade of moss after a spring rain, held a deep, reflective kindness. Today, they were focused intently on a small terrarium, where a cluster of Fae's breath fern was finally unfurling its ethereal fronds, a task that had consumed her gentle patience for weeks. The air in the glasshouse was thick with the scent of damp earth, sweet honeysuckle, and the subtle, peppery aroma of growing things. Sunlight streamed through the panes, dappling the leaves with shifting patterns of gold and emerald. Alara hummed a tuneless melody, a soft, wordless song that seemed to encourage the fern to reach for the light. She loved these quiet moments, the rhythm of her days dictated by the needs of her plants, the turning of the seasons. It was a life woven with simplicity and purpose, and for the most part, it filled her with a profound contentment. Oakhaven itself was a village steeped in time. Its cobblestone lanes meandered past cottages with thatched roofs and climbing roses, a gentle testament to centuries past. The villagers were a close-knit community, their lives intertwined like the roots beneath the ancient oak that stood sentinel in the village square. Alara felt a deep affection for her home, for its quiet traditions and the comforting predictability of its days. Yet, sometimes, especially on evenings when the fire crackled low and the wind whispered tales through the eaves of her cottage, she felt a faint, unarticulated longing. A whisper, perhaps, of something more, something unknown waiting just beyond the familiar comfort of her world. Today, however, was a day for the A's breath fern. Its tiny, almost translucent leaves seemed to glow with an inner light. Alara carefully misted the terrarium, her movements precise and tender. It was a plant rumored to thrive only where ancient magic lingered, a plant that truly lived up to the Whispering Roots' name. She smiled, a rare soft curve of her lips that lit up her whole face. Just as she was admiring her success, a shadow fell across the glasshouse door. Alara looked up, a little startled. Visitors usually announced themselves with a gentle cough or the creak of the gate. This shadow was tall, framed by the bright afternoon sun, and utterly silent. A man stepped into the warm, scented air of the glasshouse. He was a stranger, which was unusual for Oakhaven. His presence was quiet, almost hesitant, but there was an undeniable strength in his posture. He had dark, slightly rumpled hair that fell across his forehead, and eyes the color of deep sea, intelligent and observant. He wore practical, earth-toned clothes, and carried a worn leather satchel slung over one shoulder. In his hand, he held a neatly rolled parchment, tied with twine. He looked around, his gaze taking in the lush greenery, the clay pots, the sunlight filtering through the leaves, a faint wonder touching his features. Alara felt a curious flutter in her chest. She rarely encountered new faces, and this man carried an air of quiet intrigue. He wasn't like the bustling tourists who sometimes wandered in from the nearest market town, nor the familiar faces of Oakhaven. He seemed different. He finally met her gaze, and a slow, easy smile spread across his face, crinkling the corners of his eyes. It was a smile that transformed his quiet intensity into something genuinely warm and inviting. "Excuse me," he said, his voice a low, pleasant baritone, like the gentle strum of a cello string. "I hope I'm not intruding. I seem to have wandered a little off my intended path." He gestured vaguely with the rolled parchment. Elara found her voice, a little softer than usual. Not at all. This is the Whispering Roots. Are you looking for something specific? He took a step further in, his eyes still sweeping over the plants, a thoughtful expression on his face. Perhaps, or perhaps I found it without knowing I was looking. He paused, then extended a hand. Rhys Ashworth. I'm new to Oakhaven. Elara gently wiped her hand on her apron before taking his. His grip was firm but gentle, his skin warm. Elara Meadowsweet. Welcome to Oakhaven, Rhys. Meadowsweet, he repeated, a faint smile playing on his lips. A fitting name. This place, it's quite extraordinary. I've never seen anything quite like it. He gestured to the surrounding plants. All of this, it feels alive in a way I haven't encountered before. Elara felt a blush creep up her neck. She was unaccustomed to such direct compliments, especially from a stranger. Thank you. I suppose it is. I try to listen to what they need. Rhys's eyes twinkled. You listen to plants? Well, not with my ears exactly, Elara clarified, a small laugh escaping her. More with a feeling, a sense of what they're trying to tell me. She felt surprisingly comfortable explaining this to him, a man she'd known for only a few minutes. He nodded slowly, as if this made perfect sense. I understand. I try to listen to the land when I'm working. It tells you where the rivers once flowed, where the ancient paths lie hidden beneath the moss. He unfurled his parchment, revealing an intricately drawn map filled with delicate lines, swirling patterns, and tiny, precise labels. It wasn't a standard topographical map. It was an artistic rendering, filled with details of flora, geological formations, and even faint, almost mystical symbols. Elara leaned closer, captivated. You're a cartographer? Among other things, Rhys admitted, a sheepish grin. I've been commissioned to map the more esoteric features of the Whispering Woods. The old stories, the hidden groves, the places where the magic is said to linger. He tapped a spot on his map, a swirling pattern deep within the woods, marked with a tiny, stylized fern. That's what led me this way. I was looking for a particular type of fern, one that grows only in places of rare stillness. The phase breath fern, I believe it's called. Elara's eyes widened slightly. He was looking for a O'Hare fern, the one she had just spent weeks coaxing into bloom. She turned and pointed to the terrarium. You mean this one? Rhys followed her gaze, and his breath seemed to catch. He stepped closer, his face alight with a quiet awe. That's it, precisely. I've only seen illustrations in ancient texts. To see it in person, it's even more delicate than I imagined. He looked at her, his eyes full of genuine admiration. You grew this? I did, Elara confirmed, feeling a warmth spread through her. It wasn't just the compliment, it was the shared understanding, the recognition of something truly special. It's magnificent, Rhys murmured, his voice soft, almost reverent. Absolutely magnificent. I was hoping to find one, if not to collect, then at least to observe, to accurately depict its habitat on my map. But to see one thriving so beautifully, it's a privilege. Elara felt a strange sense of connection bloom between them, like a seed suddenly pushing through the soil. He wasn't just looking at the plant, he was seeing its essence, its story. It's a very particular fern, Elara explained, her voice gaining a quiet enthusiasm she rarely displayed with strangers. It needs a specific balance of humidity, light, and stillness. And it's said to grow only where the veil between worlds is thinnest, where the whispers of the past are clearest. Rhys's gaze lingered on her, a thoughtful expression deepening in his eyes. Whispers. Yes, that makes sense. The old maps, the ones I'm trying to recreate, they speak of a whispering heart deep within these woods, a place of profound quiet and ancient wisdom. He looked around the glass house again, then back at Elara. Your nursery, the Whispering Roots. It seems you found a connection to that heart. Elara smiled, a genuine, unreserved smile that reached her eyes. Perhaps I have, or perhaps it found me. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the only sounds the gentle hum of the glass house and the distant chirping of birds. Elara found herself studying Rhys, taking in the quiet intensity of his gaze, the way his fingers gently traced the edges of his map, as if feeling the contours of the land through the parchment. He had an artist's eye, a scholar's curiosity, and a gentle presence that put her immediately at ease. I don't suppose you'd be willing to share any insights about its particular needs? Rhys finally asked, his tone hopeful. For my notes, I want to ensure my depiction is as accurate as possible. Of course, Alara replied, pleased. It's not just the physical environment, there's a spirit to it too. It thrives on quiet admiration, on gentle intention. It's almost as if it feels the energy around it. She picked up a small watering can and began to tend to a bed of lavender, her movements fluid and graceful. Are you staying in Oakhaven long? For as long as it takes, Rhys said, watching her. The project is quite extensive. I'm staying at the old miller's cottage by the Willow Creek. It's rustic, but peaceful. He paused, then added, I'm glad I took the wrong turn today. Or perhaps, he corrected himself, a slight smile playing on his lips, the right one. Alara felt a blush warm her cheeks again. She found herself enjoying his quiet company, the ease of their conversation. It was rare for her to connect with someone so quickly, especially a stranger. Most people saw her as simply the plant woman, amiable but a little detached. Rhys saw something more. He saw the whispers. The miller's cottage is lovely, she said. It has a beautiful garden, if you have a green thumb. He chuckled. My thumb is usually stained with ink, not soil, I'm afraid. Though, after seeing this place, perhaps I should reconsider. There's something truly captivating about cultivating life. His gaze drifted back to the phase breath fern, then to a patch of vibrant bluebells Alara had carefully nurtured. Do you ever talk to them? Alara hesitated, then met his gaze. Sometimes, not in words, but in feeling. A quiet reassurance. They respond to it, I think. Rhys nodded, a thoughtful expression on his face. I believe you. There's an energy here, a palpable sense of care. It's quite soothing. He took a step towards the terrarium again, his hand hovering, almost touching the glass. May I sketch it? Please, Alara invited, stepping back slightly to give him space. Rhys pulled a small leather-bound sketchbook and a set of pencils from his satchel. He settled onto a low wooden stool, his movements fluid and unhurried. For the next half hour he was lost in his work, his brow furrowed in concentration, his pencil dancing across the page with remarkable precision. Alara continued her quiet tasks, repotting a young rosebush, pruning a trailing vine, but she was acutely aware of his presence. The gentle scratching of his pencil, the occasional soft sigh of concentration, it all wove into the comforting symphony of her glasshouse. She stole glances at him. The way his dark hair fell over his forehead, the strong line of his jaw, the surprising delicacy with which he held his pencil. There was a quiet intensity about him, a focused passion that mirrored her own. It wasn't a loud, demanding passion, but a deep, internal one, like the silent growth of a sturdy oak. When he finally looked up, he stretched, a faint groan escaping him. Apologies. I get lost in it sometimes. He held out the sketchbook. It's not quite finished, but I hope it captures some of its essence. Alara took the book, her fingers brushing his lightly. The sketch was breathtaking. He had captured not just the delicate structure of the fern, but its ethereal glow, the subtle play of light on its fronds, the sense of ancient magic it exuded. He had even managed to convey the stillness, the quiet strength. Rhys, she whispered, genuinely moved. This is truly beautiful. You've seen it, really seen it. His smile was soft, pleased. You helped me see it, Alara. You've cultivated not just the plant, but the atmosphere around it. He stood, gathering his things. Thank you. For the insights, for the inspiration, and for sharing this wonderful place. He rolled his map and secured it with the twine. He didn't seem to be in a rush, lingering for a moment, his gaze once more sweeping around the glasshouse, as if trying to commit every detail to memory. Alara felt a strange reluctance for him to leave. His presence had brought a subtle shift to her usually predictable day, a quiet hum of excitement she hadn't realized she was missing. I should let you get back to your work, Rhys said, finally turning towards the door. And I have a map to continue charting, perhaps. If I get lost again, I might stumble back this way. His eyes met hers, a question in their depths. Alara felt a shy smile bloom on her face. You're always welcome at the Whispering Roots, Rhys. Thank you. Alara Meadowsweet, he said, his voice warm. He gave her another one of his easy, genuine smiles, then stepped out of the glass house, his shadow stretching long before him as he walked towards the narrow path leading back to the village. Alara watched him go, until he disappeared behind the ancient hawthorn hedge that marked the boundary of her nursery. The glass house suddenly felt a little emptier, a little quieter, despite the constant hum of growing things. She ran her fingers over the still open sketch in her hand, admiring the intricate lines, the thoughtful shading. It wasn't just a drawing of a fern, it was a snapshot of a shared moment, a quiet connection. She placed the sketchbook carefully on a potting bench, her gaze still drawn to the spot where Whis had stood. He was different from anyone she had met in Oakhaven. His quiet observation, his genuine interest in the subtle magic of the world, his artistic soul, it all resonated with something deep inside her. As the sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in hues of soft orange and rose, Alara continued her work. But her thoughts kept returning to Whis, to his smile, to the way he had looked at her phase breath fern, and to the intriguing map he carried. She wondered about the other, esoteric features he was charting in the whispering woods, and about the old miller's cottage by the Willow Creek. A small, unfamiliar flutter settled in her chest. It wasn't just the warmth of the setting sun that made her feel so light. It was the echo of a quiet voice, the lingering presence of a stranger who had, for a brief afternoon, brought a new kind of whisper to the whispering roots. And she found herself, quite unexpectedly, hoping he would get lost again very soon. She spent the rest of the evening in a pleasant haze, the scent of pine, and something subtly masculine clinging to the air around her, or perhaps just to her memory. The last rays of sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of soft rose and lavender, but Alara barely noticed. Her usual ritual of tidying the whispering roots for the night, polishing the smooth oak counter, arranging the dried herbs and floral teas, felt imbued with a new, almost buoyant energy. She hummed a forgotten tune as she locked the door, the chime of the antique bell echoing a little more brightly than usual. Back in her small cottage attached to the tea house, she made herself a cup of chamomile and sat by the window overlooking the woods. The familiar silhouette of the ancient trees, usually a source of quiet comfort, now held a hint of mystery, a place where a man named Elias Thorne was charting esoteric features. She smiled into her cup. Esoteric features. What a wonderfully intriguing way to describe the magic she always felt there. Sleep didn't come easily. Her mind replayed their conversation, his deep voice, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the genuine curiosity in his gaze as he spoke of the woods. She remembered the light touch of his hand as he took the map, the faint scent of old paper and something earthy. It wasn't infatuation, not yet. It was a spark, a tiny, promising ember in the quiet hearth of her heart, long left untended. It was the feeling of being seen, not just as the woman who ran the whispering roots, but as someone who might appreciate the hidden wonders of the world, someone who might understand the pull of the wilderness. The next morning dawned clear and crisp, carrying the promise of a beautiful autumn day. Alara rose with a renewed sense of purpose, a lightness in her step that had been absent for too long. She baked a fresh batch of lavender honey scones, their aroma filling the tea house with a comforting sweetness. Her regulars trickled in, old Mrs. Gable, who always took her Earl Grey with a dash of milk and a generous slice of lemon drizzle cake. Young Thomas, the apprentice baker from down the lane, who stopped for a strong black coffee before his shift, and the quiet artist, Lena, who sketched in the corner, nursing a pot of green tea. As the morning wore on, Alara found herself glancing towards the window more often than usual, a subtle anticipation fluttering beneath her ribs. She chastised herself. Elias Thorne was a cartographer, a man of purpose. He wouldn't simply wander back into her life without reason. But the hope, persistent and sweet, remained. It was just past midday, when the tea house was at its quietest, that the chime above the door sang its familiar tune. Alara looked up from wiping down the counter, her heart giving a little leap. It wasn't Elias. It was a young woman, perhaps in her early 20s, with a bright, earnest face and a backpack laden with what looked like camping gear. "Excuse me," the woman said, her voice bright and a little breathless. "I'm looking for someone. A cartographer, Elias Thorne? I was told he might be in this area, exploring the whispering woods." Alara felt a pang of something she couldn't quite identify, disappointment certainly, but also a flicker of curiosity. "Elias Thorne," she repeated, her voice betraying none of the internal flutter. Yes, he was here yesterday. He's exploring the woods, I believe. Oh, perfect, the woman exclaimed, a relieved smile spreading across her face. I'm Clara, his assistant. I was meant to meet him at the old miller's cottage this morning, but I seem to have taken a wrong turn. Do you know how to get there from here? Elara's stomach did a peculiar flip. The miller's cottage. The very place Elias had mentioned. And an assistant. Of course he would have an assistant. He was a professional, after all. The miller's cottage is a bit of a hike from here, Elara explained, trying to keep her tone neutral. It's nestled quite deep in the woods by the Willow Creek. It's not an easy path if you're unfamiliar with the area. Clara looked crestfallen. I'm usually good with maps, but his are, well, they're more art than practical navigation sometimes. And my phone signal is non-existent out here. Elara hesitated. Her instincts told her to simply give directions, but a stronger, softer impulse urged her to offer more. Tell you what, Clara, she said, her voice softening. It's quite late for you to be setting off alone into the woods, especially if you're already disoriented. Why don't you sit, have some lunch? And I can perhaps draw you a clearer path, or even... Well, I could guide you part of the way myself later this afternoon, if I can find someone to cover the tea house for a couple of hours. Clara's face brightened considerably. Oh, that would be incredibly kind of you. Thank you so much. I could really use a cup of tea right now. As Clara settled down with a pot of Elara's signature forest berry tea and a scone, Elara found her mind racing. This was it. Her lost again very soon wish, but with a slight detour. She would be going to the miller's cottage, the very place Elias was interested in, the place he was likely still at. It felt a little like fate, a little like an adventure. She managed to coax Mrs. Gable, who was just finishing her tea, into watching the tea house for a couple of hours. Mrs. Gable, a keen observer of local goings-on, gave Elara a knowing look as she agreed. Going on an adventure, dearie? Don't be too long, I'm not as spry as I used to be. By mid-afternoon, armed with a thermos of hot tea and a small bag of her lavender honey scones, Elara and Clara set off. The path into the Whispering Woods was familiar to Elara, a worn track she'd walked countless times since childhood. But today, with the crisp autumn air carrying the scent of fallen leaves and damp earth, and the thought of Elias at the other end, it felt different. The woods themselves seemed to whisper secrets, rustling their golden and russet leaves with a knowing sigh. Clara, though initially flustered, was good company. She chattered about Elias, about his eccentricities, his brilliant mind, and his passion for uncovering hidden histories and energy lines, the esoteric features he'd mentioned. He's absolutely convinced the miller's cottage is a nexus point for something truly remarkable, Clara explained, her eyes wide. He spent weeks researching its history, poring over old maps and local folklore. He thinks it holds a key to understanding the deeper magic of these woods. Elara listened, fascinated. She'd always felt the magic of the woods, a subtle, humming energy, but to hear it articulated by someone else, someone who sought to chart it, was exhilarating. The cottage has always had a reputation, Elara mused, picking her way over a gnarled root. Locals say it's haunted, or that wishes made there come true. My grandmother used to tell me stories about it. Exactly, Clara exclaimed. Elias loves that kind of local lore. He believes it often points to deeper truths. As they delved deeper, the path narrowed, the trees growing taller and denser, their branches intertwined overhead, creating a dappled canopy of light and shadow. The air grew cooler, carrying the faint scent of moss and damp stone. Soon, the gentle murmur of Willow Creek grew louder, a soothing soundtrack to their journey. And then, through a clearing in the trees, they saw it. The miller's cottage. It wasn't quite as Elara remembered it from her childhood tales. Time had weathered its stone walls and bowed its timber frame, but it stood, surprisingly intact, nestled beside the gurgling creek. Smoke curled lazily from its chimney, a welcoming sign. A figure emerged from the cottage, a tall silhouette against the golden light of the creek. Elias. He was carrying an armful of firewood, his sleeves rolled up, revealing strong forearms. He looked up, perhaps drawn by the sound of their approach, and his eyes met Elara's. A slow smile spread across his face, a genuine, delighted smile that reached his eyes and crinkled their corners. He dropped the wood with a thud. Elara and Clara, what a surprise! I thought you'd never find your way, Clara. Clara rushed forward, apologizing profusely for getting lost. Elias, ever gracious, simply laughed and clapped her on the shoulder. Then he turned back to Alara, his gaze lingering. I wasn't expecting to see you again so soon, he said, his voice a low, warm rumble that sent a shiver down her spine. Though I admit I was rather hoping I would. Alara felt a blush creep up her neck. Clara needed directions, she explained, trying to sound nonchalant. And it's a bit of a tricky path. I thought I'd guide her. And bring provisions, I see, Elias said, noticing the thermos and bag in her hand. You're a lifesaver, Alara. I was just about to make some tea, but I've run out of my special blend. I suppose yours is far superior anyway. He winked. The banter was easy, comfortable, as if no time had passed at all. Elias led them inside the cottage. It was small but surprisingly cozy, with a crackling fire in the hearth, a roughly made table laden with maps and instruments, and a couple of camping chairs. The air smelled of wood smoke, old paper, and something distinctly herbal. Make yourselves at home, Elias said, gesturing to the chairs. I've just been reviewing some of my findings. This place is even more fascinating than I anticipated. As Alara poured tea from her thermos and offered scones, she observed him. He was clearly in his element here, surrounded by his work. His eyes, when he spoke of the cottage and the woods, shone with an infectious enthusiasm. He explained how he believed the cottage was built on an ancient energy line, a convergence point that local stories had vaguely intuited for centuries. He showed them intricate sketches of swirling patterns he'd found etched into old stones near the creek, and spoke of subtle magnetic anomalies he'd detected. It's all very scientific, in its own way, he said, catching Alara's eye. But it also requires a certain openness to the unseen, a sensitivity to the whispers of the land. Alara felt a profound connection to his words. My grandmother used to say the woods have a memory, she offered softly, and that the cottage remembers all the wishes made within its walls. Elias leaned forward, his interest piqued. Wishes? Tell me more. And so, Alara found herself sharing tales from her childhood, stories her grandmother had passed down about the miller's cottage. About young lovers who'd wished for eternal devotion, about farmers who'd prayed for bountiful harvests, about lonely travelers who'd sought solace. Each story, she realized, was a tiny thread in the intricate tapestry of the woods, a testament to the human heart's enduring hope. Elias listened intently, occasionally jotting notes in a small leather-bound journal. Clara, meanwhile, was busy setting up her own equipment, clearly used to Elias's deep dives into local lore. These aren't just quaint stories, Alara, Elias said, closing his journal. They're data. They speak to the profound impact this place has had on people, and perhaps the profound impact it has had on them. What if these wishes aren't just prayers, but tiny acts of intention, collective manifestations that have subtly shaped the energy of this place over centuries? Alara felt a thrill. He wasn't dismissing her grandmother's stories. He was trying to understand them, to integrate them into his own scientific framework. It was a beautiful blend of logic and wonder. The afternoon slipped by effortlessly. Elias gave them a tour of the cottage, pointing out ancient carvings he'd uncovered beneath layers of grime, or subtle architectural anomalies that suggested a purpose beyond mere shelter. He even showed them a hidden alcove in the stone hearth, where he'd found a collection of dried herbs and a small, tarnished silver locket, long forgotten. I haven't opened it yet, he admitted, holding the locket in his palm, his gaze thoughtful. It feels like a private moment. Perhaps it holds a story all its own. Alara felt a strange tenderness at his words. He respected the past, the unseen lives that had touched this place. It was a quality she found deeply appealing. As the sun began its descent, casting long golden shadows through the trees, Alara knew it was time to leave. Mrs. Gable would be wondering where she was. Thank you, Elias, she said, gathering her thermos and bag. This was truly fascinating. And the scones weren't too stale, I hope? He smiled, a warm, genuine smile that made her heart skip a beat. They were perfect, Alara. Absolutely perfect. Just like your company. I hope you'll come back. He paused, then added, Perhaps you could help me uncover more of the cottage's secrets. Your knowledge of local history. Your grandmother's stories. They're invaluable. Alara's chest fluttered again. I'd like that very much, Elias. As she and Clara walked back through the twilight woods, the air growing chill, Alara felt a profound sense of contentment. The woods, once a familiar comfort, now held a new layer of wonder, a shared mystery. She had found something she hadn't even realized she was looking for, a kindred spirit, a man who saw the world with the same blend of curiosity and reverence as she did. The next few days settled into a comfortable rhythm, but one subtly altered by the memory of Elias and the miller's cottage. Alara found herself sketching little maps of the woods in her mind, recalling snippets of her grandmother's tales, wondering about the silver locket. True to his word, Elias reappeared at the Whispering Roots a few days later, just as Alara was closing up shop. He looked less like a wild woodsman and more like a professor, his hair neatly combed, a clean linen shirt beneath his tweed jacket. He carried a small, carefully wrapped package. "Good evening, Alara," he said, his voice a balm to her ears. "I hope I'm not keeping you." "Not at all, Elias," she replied, her smile genuine and warm. "Come in. Can I get you a tea?" "I'd love one, thank you," he said, settling into a familiar chair by the window. "But first, I wanted to bring you something." He placed the package on the counter. "It's a small thank you for your help with Clara, and for sharing those wonderful stories. I've been thinking about them constantly." Alara carefully unwrapped the package. Inside lay a beautifully bound book, its cover embossed with intricate, leafy patterns. It was a collection of local folklore, specifically focused on the Whispering Woods and the Willow Creek Valley, published in the late 19th century. "Elias, this is wonderful," she breathed, tracing the delicate patterns on the cover. "Where did you find it?" "An old bookseller in the nearest town," he explained. "I remembered you mentioning your grandmother's stories, and I thought you might appreciate a written record. It's surprisingly rare." "I truly do," she said, her heart swelling with gratitude. It wasn't just a gift. It was a gesture of understanding, a recognition of her own connection to the past and the magic of the woods. "Thank you." As she steeped his tea, a special blend of calming herbs she thought he might enjoy after a day of charting esoteric features, they fell into an easy conversation. He told her more about his progress at the cottage, about a faint, almost invisible symbol he'd uncovered on the hearthstone that mirrored some of the carvings he'd found outside. "It's like a puzzle, Alara," he mused, sipping his tea. "Each piece, whether it's an old carving or a whispered legend, fits together to reveal a larger picture, and your insights, your intuitive understanding of this place, are proving to be invaluable." Alara felt a thrill at his words. To be seen not just as a tea-house owner, but as a knowledgeable partner in his fascinating quest, was exhilarating. She found herself opening up, sharing her own observations about the subtle shifts in the woods, the way certain plants only grew in specific clearings, the strange luminescence she'd sometimes noticed near the Willow Creek on moonlit nights. "You have a remarkable eye, Alara," he said, his gaze warm and admiring. "A true sensitivity to the pulse of the land. It's a gift." Their conversations became a regular occurrence. Elias would often stop by the Whispering Roots in the late afternoon, sometimes for a quick tea, sometimes to share a new discovery from the cottage, or to ask her about a particular local legend. He even started bringing her small gifts, a perfectly smooth river stone, a pressed fern leaf, a tiny, intricately carved wooden bird he'd found at a local market. Each gift was carefully chosen, a silent testament to his growing understanding of her and her love for the natural world. Alara, in turn, found herself baking special treats for him, leaving little notes with her tea recommendations, and even venturing into the woods herself with a newfound curiosity, seeking out the places he described, feeling the subtle energies he spoke of. She even found herself drawing her own amateur maps, trying to chart the emotional landscape of the woods, the places where she'd felt the strongest sense of peace, or wonder, or sorrow. One crisp autumn afternoon, Elias arrived with an unusual air of quiet excitement. He sat down, not ordering tea but simply looking at her with a gentle intensity. "Alara," he began, his voice a little softer than usual. "I finally opened the locket from the miller's cottage." Her breath hitched. She'd been wondering about it since he'd first mentioned it. "And?" she prompted softly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the small, tarnished silver locket. He carefully opened it, revealing two tiny, faded photographs. One was of a young woman with kind eyes and a faint smile, her hair pulled back in a simple braid. The other of a man, rugged and earnest, with a strong jawline. I believe they were the original Millers, Elias explained, his voice hushed. And on the inside of the locket, carefully etched, are two initials, AM and W, and beneath them, a date, 1872. Elara felt a wave of emotion wash over her. To hold such a tangible piece of the past, a silent testament to a long-ago love, was profoundly moving. "What else did you find?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I found a small hidden compartment beneath the floorboards of the cottage," Elias continued, his eyes alight with discovery. It contained a bundle of letters, tied with a faded blue ribbon. He paused, taking a deep breath. "They tell a beautiful story, of a love that blossomed despite hardship, of shared dreams and a deep connection to this land. Abigail was a healer, Thomas, the miller. They loved the woods just as we do. And their letters, they speak of the cottage as their sanctuary, a place where their love could truly flourish, where they made wishes for their future, for their children, for peace." Elara felt a lump form in her throat. It wasn't just old letters. It was a living story, echoing across more than a century. "The wishes," she murmured. "My grandmother's stories were true." Elias nodded, his gaze meeting hers, a shared understanding passing between them. "They were, and as I read their words, Elara, I couldn't help but think of you, of your own connection to this place, to these stories. It feels significant, somehow, as if their love, their wishes, have left an imprint on the very fabric of the cottage, waiting for someone to rediscover them." He carefully placed the locket and the bundle of letters on the counter between them. "I want to preserve their story, Elara, not just for my research, but because it feels important, a testament to enduring love and the magic of this place. And I'd like to do it with you, to perhaps document their story, weave it into the greater tapestry of the woods. What do you say?" Elara looked at the faded photographs, the tiny, intimate details of a life lived long ago. She looked at Elias, his face earnest and hopeful, his eyes reflecting the quiet magic of the moment. And she felt it then, a deep, resonant certainty. This wasn't just about old letters or esoteric features. It was about connection, about shared wonder, about building something beautiful together. "I say yes, Elias," she replied, her voice soft but firm, a small hopeful smile gracing her lips. "I say yes." The afternoon light filtered through the window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, the worn pages of the old book, and the quiet promise exchanged between two people who had found each other amidst the whispers of the woods. The journey to uncover Abigail and Thomas's story, and perhaps their own, had just begun. The afternoon light filtered through the window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, the worn pages of the old book, and the quiet promise exchanged between two people who had found each other amidst the whispers of the woods. The journey to uncover Abigail and Thomas's story, and perhaps their own, had just begun. A breath, soft and drawn, escaped Elias's lips. His gaze, usually so steady and calm, held a new shimmering light as it met Clara's. The world outside, with its rustling leaves and distant bird song, seemed to hold its breath with them. He reached out, his hand gently cupping her cheek, his thumb brushing over the soft skin beneath her eye. It was a touch that held the weight of unspoken promises, a gentle inquiry into the future they were now choosing to build. Leaning in, Elias closed the small distance between them. His lips met hers in a kiss that was tender, hesitant, and utterly profound. It wasn't a kiss of fiery passion, but one of burgeoning affection, of quiet understanding, and the fragile, beautiful hope that bloomed between them. It tasted of forest air and old paper, of unspoken questions and the sweet, lingering answer. When they finally parted, their eyes still locked, a comfortable blush warmed Clara's cheeks, mirroring the warmth that spread through her chest. "A beautiful journey, I think," Elias murmured, his voice a low rumble that resonated deep within her. He didn't ask what her yes meant beyond the book, but his gaze conveyed it all. It was a yes to partnership, to shared purpose, and to the blossoming connection that had been quietly taking root in the fertile ground of their solitude. Clara simply nodded, a genuine smile now unfurling on her face, free of any prior reservations. "I think so too, Elias." She looked down at the open book, then back at him. "So, where do we start?" He chuckled, a sound that was surprisingly bright and full of joy. With sustenance, I believe. And then perhaps we read the rest of this aloud. Together. That evening marked a quiet turning point. Elias, with a newfound lightness in his step, prepared a simple but comforting meal of hearty stew and freshly baked bread. Clara, usually prone to restlessness, found herself content to sit at the small wooden table, watching him move about his kitchen. The cabin, already warm and inviting, seemed to hum with a new energy, a gentle anticipation. The scent of pine and simmering herbs mingled with a faint, sweet smell of the old book, which now lay carefully closed on the table between them. After dinner, with the dishes washed and put away, they settled by the fireplace. Elias stoked the embers until they glowed warmly, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Clara curled up in the armchair while Elias sat on the rug beside her, the book resting on his knees. The first few pages they had read had only hinted at Abigail and Thomas's story, a love blooming amidst hardship, a quiet strength that mirrored the woods around them. Now, with a shared purpose, they delved deeper. Elias began to read, his voice a low, soothing cadence that filled the small space. He read of Abigail, a woman of quiet fortitude who had found herself drawn to the untamed beauty of the wilderness, and of Thomas, a man whose hands were calloused from the earth, but whose heart held a surprising tenderness. They discovered how Abigail, a woman of letters, had sought refuge from a stifling city life, finding solace and purpose in the raw, honest existence of the frontier. Thomas, a woodsman and a builder, was initially wary of her city ways, yet found himself captivated by her spirit, her keen mind, and the quiet strength beneath her delicate exterior. Clara listened, occasionally interjecting with a thought or a question, her own insights weaving into Elias's steady narration. They learned of the small cabin Thomas had built for Abigail, not far from his own, in a clearing she had chosen. A place where she could write, observe nature, and find her own peace. They learned of their hesitant courtship, born not of grand gestures, but of shared silences, helping hands, and a growing respect. Thomas would leave her small gifts of wild berries or a perfectly carved wooden bird. Abigail would share stories from her books or a special tea blend she had concocted. It wasn't a whirlwind romance, was it? Clara mused, her gaze fixed on the dancing flames. It was a slow burn, like embers in a hearth. Elias nodded, his fingers tracing the worn cover of the book. Perhaps the strongest fires are those that start slowly, built on a foundation of shared understanding rather than fleeting sparks. His eyes flickered to Clara, a silent question in their depths. She met his gaze, a soft smile playing on her lips. Perhaps. It makes sense given the lives they led. There wasn't much room for frivolity, only for what was true and lasting. As the days turned into a week, the rhythm of their new partnership settled into a comforting pattern. Clara found herself spending more and more time at Elias's cabin. Her own small cottage, once her sanctuary, now felt a little empty without his quiet presence. She didn't officially move in, but her toothbrush found a permanent spot next to his, a few changes of clothes hung in his wardrobe, and her favorite mug became a regular feature on his kitchen shelf. Each morning they would share a simple breakfast, often oatmeal with berries Elias had preserved, or eggs from a neighbor's farm. Then, with cups of steaming herbal tea, they would return to Abigail's story. They discovered how Abigail and Thomas had faced challenges together, harsh winters, a failed crop, the fear of isolation. But through it all, their bond deepened. Abigail, with her gentle wisdom, taught Thomas to see the beauty in words and ideas, while Thomas, with his grounded strength, showed Abigail the enduring power of the land and the quiet satisfaction of creation. One afternoon, as Elias read a particularly poignant passage detailing Thomas's despair during a devastating storm that threatened their small community, Clara reached out, her hand finding his. His fingers, rough and warm, intertwined with hers, a simple gesture that spoke volumes. The story of Abigail and Thomas wasn't just a historical account, it was a mirror reflecting the quiet strength and unspoken devotion that was beginning to define their own connection. It says here, Elias read, his voice softening, that Abigail often found inspiration for her stories by walking the grounds around her cabin, particularly the path leading to the old spring. She believed the land itself held memories. Clara's eyes lit up. Then that's where we go next, to Abigail's cabin. We've only ever peeked in, it's time to truly explore. The next morning, armed with notebooks, pencils, and a shared sense of adventure, they set off for Abigail's cabin. The path was overgrown, but Elias, with his knowledge of the woods, easily navigated the winding way. Sunlight dappled through the canopy of leaves, painting shifting patterns on the forest floor. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth and pine needles. The cabin stood as a silent sentinel in its clearing, a testament to time and resilience. Its windows were dark eyes, its wooden walls weathered to a soft, silvery gray. Elias carefully pushed open the creaking door, revealing an interior steeped in dust, and the faint, sweet smell of forgotten things. "It's exactly as I imagined," Clara breathed, stepping inside. The main room was small, dominated by a large stone fireplace. A rough-hewn table stood in the center, and a few simple chairs were scattered around. Shelves, now empty, lined one wall, hinting at the books Abigail must have once cherished. They moved slowly, respectfully, through the space. Clara's keen eyes, accustomed to seeking out hidden details in manuscripts, scanned every surface. Elias, with his more practical approach, checked the structural integrity, gently testing floorboards and window frames. In what must have been Abigail's writing nook, by a window overlooking a small stream, Clara found a loose floorboard. "Elias, look!" He knelt beside her, his fingers expertly prying up the board. Beneath it, nestled in the dark, dusty space, was a small leather-bound journal. Its cover was worn smooth, its pages yellowed with age, but it was unmistakably Abigail's. Clara gasped, her heart thrumming with excitement. She carefully lifted it out, brushing away the dust. "Oh, Elias, this must be it." Her personal thoughts, not just the stories she shared. They took it back to Elias's cabin, the journal clutched protectively in Clara's hands. That evening, as the first stars pricked the twilight sky, they sat together once more, the journal open between them. Abigail's elegant script filled the pages, revealing a woman of even greater depth than they had imagined. She wrote of her struggles with loneliness, her initial fears of the wilderness, and the profound solace she found in nature. But more than anything, she wrote of Thomas. Not just as her partner, but as her anchor, her quiet confidante, the man who saw beyond her scholarly pursuits to the passionate heart beating beneath. October 17, 1867, Elias read, his voice hushed. "Thomas built a new gate for my small garden today. He always knows what I need before I ask. His hands, though rough from the axe, placed each hinge with such care, such tenderness. Sometimes I catch him watching me as I write, a gentle smile playing on his lips. It is in these quiet moments that I feel most truly seen, most truly loved. He is the sturdy oak to my winding vine, and together we create a strength I never knew I might possess." Clara felt a prickle of tears behind her eyes. "Oh, Abigail," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. She loved him so deeply. Elias closed the journal gently, his gaze lingering on the worn leather. It seems their story was even richer than the book revealed. He turned to Clara, his eyes mirroring her emotion. "Perhaps, sometimes, the greatest love stories are not found in grand declarations, but in the quiet acts of seeing and being seen." The discovery of the journal deepened their connection, not only to Abigail and Thomas, but to each other. They spent the next few days meticulously transcribing Abigail's entries, each word bringing them closer to the heart of her world. Clara found herself confiding in Elias more readily, sharing anecdotes from her past, moments of doubt and joy that she had rarely voiced before. She spoke of her childhood, of her parents' expectations, and the quiet pressure she had always felt to be achieving, which had often left her feeling unmoored, constantly searching for the next project, the next place. "I think that's why this place, this cabin, felt so different," she admitted one evening, as they watched the sunset paint the sky in fiery hues. "It's not about achieving anything, not in the traditional sense. It's about being, about belonging." She paused, then looked at Elias, her gaze vulnerable. "I've never really felt like I belonged anywhere before. Always a visitor, an observer." Elias listened patiently, his hand resting lightly on her arm. "Perhaps you just hadn't found your anchor yet," he said softly, echoing Abigail's words. "Some people are meant to wander until they find the place or a person that feels like home." He paused and continued, "My life has always been here in these woods. It can be solitary, but it's never felt lonely. Until recently, perhaps, until you arrived." His admission was quiet, but it resonated deeply within Clara. It was a confession of his own quiet longing, a vulnerability he rarely showed. Their shared work on Abigail's journal led them to another clue. Abigail often mentioned a hidden grove, her sanctuary, where she would go to gather herbs and meditate, a place where Thomas had carved their initials into the oldest tree. The journal hinted at its location being near a specific bend in the stream, marked by a cluster of ancient white birches. The search for the grove became their next adventure. For days, they combed the woods surrounding Abigail's cabin, following the winding stream, their eyes scanning for the distinctive white bark of the birches. It was a slow, deliberate search, filled with quiet conversation, shared observations, and the comfortable rhythm of walking side by side. Clara, once city-bound, found herself growing more attuned to the forest, learning to identify different bird calls and the subtle changes in the terrain. Elias, in turn, seemed to revel in her growing appreciation for his world, his explanations gentle and patient. One afternoon, just as they were about to give up for the day, Clara spotted it. A cluster of 3 towering white birches, their smooth bark like parchment against the deeper greens of the forest, stood sentinel around a small, secluded clearing. A faint, overgrown path led into the grove. "Elias, look!" she exclaimed, her voice filled with triumph. He followed her, his own face breaking into a wide, joyful smile. They pushed through the last tangle of undergrowth and stepped into a small, sun-dappled space. It was truly a sanctuary. Wildflowers bloomed in scattered patches, and the air was thick with the scent of damp earth and blooming dogwood. In the center of the grove stood an ancient oak, its branches reaching skyward like gnarled arms. Clara approached the oak reverently, her fingers tracing the rough bark. And there it was, faint but discernible, etched into the ancient wood. An eye entwined with a teat, surrounded by a crudely carved heart. "They really were here," Clara whispered, a lump forming in her throat. Their love, carved into this living monument. Elias stood beside her, his arm gently circling her waist, pulling her close. He leaned down, his chin resting on the top of her head. "A testament to enduring love," he murmured. "And a promise, perhaps, for those who come after." They spent the rest of the afternoon in the grove, simply being. They sat on a fallen log, sharing a thermos of tea and some homemade biscuits, talking about Abigail and Thomas, about their lives, and about the quiet magic of finding such a personal piece of their history. Clara felt a profound sense of peace settle over her, a feeling of belonging that resonated deep within her bones. Later that week, while poring over Abigail's journal again, they found a reference to a hidden cache, a small waterproof box buried near the foundations of her cabin. Abigail wrote of it as a legacy, a collection of her most cherished writings, and a final letter to Thomas, intended to be found only after her passing. The entry was dated much later than the others, indicating it was written in her twilight years. The thought of finding Abigail's final message filled them with both excitement and a poignant sense of reverence. The next morning they returned to Abigail's cabin, equipped with a small shovel and a measuring tape. Following the cryptic clues in the journal, 3 paces from the northwest corner, beneath the elderberry bush, they began to dig. The earth was damp and stubborn, but Elias's strong hands made quick work of it. Clara watched, her heart thumping with anticipation. After about 15 minutes, the shovel hit something solid. "Got it," Elias said, his voice a low grunt of effort. He carefully unearthed a small iron-bound wooden box, remarkably well preserved despite the years. The wood was dark with age, but the iron straps still held firm. They took the box back to Elias's cabin, placing it on the sturdy wooden table. The moment felt momentous, as if they were about to unlock a secret held for over a century. Elias, with a small, careful pry bar, managed to open the box. Inside, nestled amongst dried leaves and carefully wrapped in oilcloth, were several bundles of yellowed paper. There were more short stories, poems, and finally, a thicker envelope addressed in Abigail's elegant hand. "To my dearest Thomas, and to whomever else may find this." Clara's hands trembled slightly as she reached for the letter. "This is it," she breathed. Elias nodded, his gaze gentle and encouraging. "Read it, Clara." With the last rays of the setting sun casting a golden glow through the window, Clara carefully unfolded the fragile paper and began to read Abigail's last words. The letter was a beautiful, heartfelt testament to a life well lived and a love deeply cherished. Abigail wrote of her enduring love for Thomas, of the joy he had brought into her life, and of the quiet contentment they had found together in their small corner of the world. She spoke of the lessons she had learned, of finding strength in vulnerability, and of the profound beauty of a shared journey. But it was the last paragraph that brought tears to Clara's eyes, and a palpable emotion to Elias's face. To any who find this, Abigail had written, know that love is not always a grand adventure, but often a quiet unfolding. It is in the gentle hand that steadies you, the shared silence that comforts, the knowing glance that understands without words. It is in the building, brick by brick, moment by moment, of a life entwined. May you find such a love, and may it root you deeply, as Thomas rooted me here. Clara finished reading, her voice a little choked, and looked up at Elias. His eyes, usually so composed, were shining with unshed tears. He reached across the table, taking her hand, his grip firm and reassuring. She found it, Clara whispered. She found her home. And so did he, Elias added, his voice a low murmur. They built it together. His thumb stroked the back of her hand, a small, comforting gesture. What do you think she meant by a quiet unfolding? Clara considered it, her gaze moving from the ancient letter to Elias's steady eyes. I think it means that love isn't always about a sudden flash of lightning, but more like the slow bloom of a flower, or the way a river carves its path over time. It deepens, it widens, it becomes more beautiful with every passing season. She looked at him, a profound understanding settling in her heart. It's about trust and patience and the courage to let someone truly see you and to truly see them back. Elias's gaze held hers, an unspoken question and a quiet affirmation passing between them. He squeezed her hand gently. I think, he said, his voice imbued with a newfound tenderness, that Abigail, even from beyond the grave, still has much to teach us. The discovery of Abigail's final legacy felt like a culmination, yet also a new beginning. It solidified their project, providing a beautiful, complete picture of the love story they had set out to uncover. But more importantly, it had woven their own story into the fabric of the woods, binding them closer than ever before. Clara no longer felt the restless urge to move on. Elias's cabin, the woods, and his quiet, steadfast presence had become her anchor. That night, as the moon cast silver light through the windows, Clara lay in Elias's arms, listening to the steady beat of his heart. The journey to Abigail and Thomas's story had led them not just to the past, but deeply into their own present, and towards a future that was beginning to unfold, quietly and beautifully, just for them. She felt a profound sense of peace, a certainty that for the first time in her life, she was exactly where she was meant to be. The whispers of the woods had not only revealed a century-old love, but had also guided her home. And the story, she knew, was far from over. He shifted, just slightly, pulling her closer still until there was no space left between them. His chin rested on the top of her head, and she could feel the gentle brush of his lips against her hair. No, he murmured, his voice a low, steady rumble that vibrated through her. It's just beginning. For us. Sarah tilted her head back, meeting his gaze. His eyes, usually so keen and observant, were soft now, reflecting the flickering candlelight and an emotion so profound it took her breath away. David, she whispered, the name feeling like a revelation on her tongue. He smiled, a gentle, tender curve of his lips. When we started this, Sarah, I thought we were just restoring a house, but we found something so much more, didn't we? A blueprint for a love that endures, and I think we found our own. A tear traced a path down her cheek, quickly absorbed by the warmth of his thumb as he cupped her face. I've never felt this before, she confessed, her voice thick with emotion. This certainty. This quiet, deep joy. Me neither, he admitted, his thumb gently stroking her skin. I want to stay here, Sarah, in this house, in these woods, with you, to finish what Abigail and Thomas started, not just the physical repairs, but to fill it with our own laughter, our own quiet evenings by the fire, our own story. The thought settled over her, warm and comforting as the blanket they shared. This wasn't just a project anymore. It was a home, imbued with the spirit of enduring love. Our own story, she repeated, tasting the words. A story of renovations and revelations, of dusty attics and unearthed letters, of two people who stumbled upon an old love and found their own in the process. He leaned in, his lips brushing hers, a feather-light touch that promised everything. "Will you write that story with me, Sarah? Every chapter, every paragraph, every quiet, beautiful moment?" Her answer was a soft, "Yes," breathed against his mouth, followed by a kiss that was both a promise and a beginning. It wasn't a whirlwind romance, but a love built on shared discovery, quiet understanding, and the timeless echoes of a past love that had shown them the way. As the candle flickered, casting long shadows across the room, Sarah nestled deeper into David's embrace, knowing that their journey had just truly begun. The cottage, once a forgotten relic, was now a beacon, ready to hold the next century of love, built on the solid foundation of yesterday's whispers and today's heartfelt vows. And as the last light of the candle dimmed, giving way to the gentle moonlight, she drifted to sleep, cradled in his arms, her heart humming a lullaby of forever.